Whoa, listen to that. Did you hear that shift?
Yeah.
How those drums suddenly just punch through? So much power. And the vocal, it just pops forward, but, you know, still sounds really natural and warm.
That's it right there. That's the magic, really, of parallel compression.
And folks, today we're not just going to talk about this technique. We've actually got something, well, pretty unbelievable to share from our friends over at Audio Plug-in Deals.
Exactly. We're going to dive deep into parallel compression today. Like, really get into it, what it is, why it works, why it's such a, well, a game changer for your mixes.
Yeah, whether you're just starting out messing with audio or you've been mixing for years, this deep dive, it's going to equip you.
For sure. We've looked at articles, guides, heard from top engineers.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're going to introduce you to an amazing bundle of plugins that could seriously become your new secret weapon.
Okay, let's break it down then. Parallel compression. Sounds kind of technical, maybe.
That's good, yeah.
But the idea itself is actually pretty simple to get your head around. Think about making a really great coffee blend. You could use just one type of bean, right? And it'd probably be fine, good even. But what if you took, say, a really dark, rich roast for body and blended it with a brighter, maybe more acidic one for complexity? You mix them together.
Ah, okay, I see where you're going. You get something deeper, more complex than either one on its own.
Exactly. And parallel compression in audio. It's kind of the same principle.
It really is a great analogy. Instead of just processing a sound directly, what we call serial processing, you basically split the signal.
Right.
You keep one path totally clean,
Yeah.
untouched. That's your dry signal.
The original sound.
The original, yeah. Then you take a copy, send it down another path,
Yeah.
and on that path you compress it, often, like really heavily. That's the wet signal.
Okay.
And the magic, like you said, happens when you blend that wet compressed signal back in with the original dry one.
So why do this? Why the extra step? I mean, what's wrong with just sticking a compressor on the track like we normally do?
Well, standard compression is obviously super important, right? For controlling levels, making things sit in the mix.
Sure.
But sometimes, when you clamp down on the dynamics, that difference between the loud and quiet bits,
Yeah.
you can kind of squeeze the life out of it.
Yeah. It can sound a bit flat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You might lose that initial crack of the snare or those tiny little details in a vocal performance. It can just feel less exciting.
Okay, so parallel compression is about getting that control, but without losing the punch. Keeping the details.
Precisely. That's where it really shines. Because you're always keeping that original, uncompressed, dry signal present. You keep all its natural peaks and energy. The dynamics are still there. Those initial hits, the transients that give sounds their definition, they stay sharp.
Okay.
And here's the cool part. Even though that parallel signal is squashed pretty hard.
Right, heavily compressed.
Yeah, when you blend it back in, the perceived volume, how loud it sounds to us, actually goes up.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound choked or overcompressed like it might if you just crush the main track.
Hang on, that's really interesting. So we can make tracks sound louder, bigger, more powerful.
Yeah.
But they still breathe. They still feel dynamic.
That's the goal. That heavily compressed signal adds sustain, it adds body, it makes things feel, fatter, fuller.
Right.
Some folks even find it adds a bit of air or space around the sound. It's subtle, but it's there. The key thing is you're not just reducing dynamics, you're adding this compressed layer on top of the original. It's additive.
Okay. I'm sold on the why. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So how do we actually do this in our software, in our DWs?
There are a few main ways people usually do it. Probably the most flexible is using sends and returns. O tracks or FX channels.
Right, like you'd use for reverb or delay.
Exactly the same idea.
Yeah.
You take your track, say your main drum bus, and you use a send to route a copy of that signal over to a separate O track.
Okay.
And that O track is where you put your compressor for the parallel signal. Now, one really important thing here is setting that send to pre-fader.
Pre-fader. Okay, I've heard that term. Why is that so critical?
Because pre-fader means the signal is tapped off before your main track's volume fader.
Ah, gotcha.
So if you adjust the volume of your main drums, it doesn't change how much signal is going to your parallel compression track. You get independent control.
Which you definitely want for blending.
Absolutely. You need that to balance the dry and the heavily compressed wet signal perfectly.
Yeah.
Oh, and on that O track, if your compressor plugin has its own mix knob, make sure that's set to 100% wet. You only want the compressed sound coming from that channel.
Makes sense. So sends and returns give you lots of control, especially if you want to maybe EQ the compressed signal separately or something.
Exactly. You can put an EQ before or after the compressor on that O track, maybe clean up lows before compressing or shape it after. Very flexible. Now, for drums specifically, some engineers even send individual drums, kick, snare, maybe toms to the parallel O, not just the whole bus.
For even finer control.
Right. Yeah. But okay, what's another way?
What's simpler?
The absolute simplest way, honestly. Just duplicate the track.
Nice, copy it.
Yep. Got a vocal track,
Ugh.
Command D, Control D, whatever your DAW uses. Now you've got two identical tracks. Leave the original alone that's your dry. On the copy, insert your compressor and smash it.
Huh, okay.
Then you just use the volume fader on that duplicated compressed track to blend it back in with the original. Super straightforward.
That does sound easy. Is there a third way?
Yeah, lots of modern compressors actually have a built-in wet-dry mix knob these days.
Oh, right inside the plugin itself.
Exactly. So you can set up your heavy compression settings within the plugin and then just use that mix knob to blend the compressed sound with the clean signal that's also passing through. Like FabFilter Pro C2 is a famous example.
Okay, so sends for flexibility, duplicating for simplicity, built-in mix knobs for convenience. Is one method better than others?
Not really better, just different trade-offs, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Depends on your workflow. If you want to get fancy with EQ on the parallel signal, sends are great. If you just need it quick, duplicating or using a mix knob is faster. All valid ways to get there.
All right, setup sorted. Now, the settings on that parallel compressor, you said aggressive. What does that actually mean? Are there typical starting points?
Yeah, aggressive is key here.
Okay.
It feels weird at first because you're hitting it way harder than you normally would.
Okay.
So attack time,
Yeah.
usually pretty fast.
Yeah.
You want to grab those transients, really emphasize the punch.
Got it. Fast attack. What about release?
Release? Well, that can vary a bit more. A really fast release can give you that pumping effect, which can be cool for energy, especially on drums.
Rhythmic pumping.
Yeah. Or you can go a bit slower for a smoother, less obvious effect. Depending on the music, the tempo, what you're going for. You got to use your ears.
And the ratio. Gain reduction.
High ratio, definitely. Like 10.1, 20.1, maybe even higher. And don't be shy with the gain reduction meter. Seeing 6 dB, 10 dB, even 15 dB or more of compression on that parallel track is totally normal.
Wow.
And remember, you're blending it back in gently so you can afford to really squash that parallel signal to bring up all the low-level details and add that density.
You mentioned EQ earlier, too. Is it common to EQ the parallel signal?
Yeah, definitely. Especially putting an EQ before the compressor in that parallel chain.
Before. Why before?
Well, think about drums or bass. They have a lot of low-end energy, right?
Sure.
If you heavily compress all that low-frequency stuff, it can sometimes make the mix sound kind of muddy or boomy. So often, people will put a high-pass filter before the compressor on the parallel track.
To cut out the super low rumble.
Exactly. Clean it up before it hits the compressor. That helps keep the parallel compression focused on adding punch and body in the mids and clarity in the highs without clouding up the bottom end.
Smart. Okay, now. Whenever we're splitting signals, duplicating things, is there a danger of phase issues? Things sounding weird?
It's a valid question. Theoretically, yeah. If the timing between the dry signal and the process signal gets slightly off, maybe because a plugin introduces latency.
Right, processing delay.
Yeah. And if your DIW doesn't perfectly compensate for that delay, then when you combine the two signals back together, you could get phase cancellation.
Yeah.
Certain frequencies might get weaker, or you get that hollow comb filtering sound.
Not good.
Not good. But the good news is modern DAWs are generally really, really good at automatic delay compensation, especially when you're doing everything in the box, just using plugins.
So mostly not a worry these days.
In most typical scenarios, no. It's something to be aware of, maybe, if you're using outboard gear. But for in-the-box parallel compression, DAWs usually handle it fine.
Okay, good to know. Let's talk about a really famous application, New York-style compression, especially on drums. What's the deal with that?
Ah, the New York sound. Yeah, it's basically taking parallel compression on drums and adding a specific EQ flavor to make them sound absolutely massive.
Massive how?
Like super punchy low end, really crisp, snappy high end. Just bigger, more exciting, more finished sounding. You hear it on tons of records.
Sounds awesome. So what are the ingredients for that NYC recipe?
Okay, so first, you've got that aggressive parallel compression we already talked about.
Fast attack, high ratio, lots of gain reduction.
Yep, all that. Release time to the groove, often pretty fast too. But the real signature part comes after the compressor on that parallel O track. You add an EQ.
Okay, EQ after compression this time.
Right, and you do some pretty serious boosting. Typically, a big boost down low, somewhere around 100 hertz maybe, for that deep kick, drum thump, and weight.
Adding body.
Exactly. And then another big boost up high, maybe around 10 kilohertz, 10K. That brings out the snap of the snare, the sizzle of the cymbals, the overall air and clarity.
How big are we talking for these boosts?
Can be quite a lot, like 6 dB, 10 dB, sometimes even more. You're really shaping that compressed signal before blending it in.
Wow. Okay, so walk me through setting that up. Drums, O track.
Right. Create an O track, send your main drum bus to it, pre-fader. Some people even sneak a bit of the bass guitar in there too, helps glue the low end together.
Ooh, interesting tip.
Yeah. Then on that O track,
Huh?
first, your compressor, set it aggressively. Second, your EQ. Add those big boosts at around 100 hertz and 10 kilohertz.
Got it.
Then start with the fader for that O track all the way down. Slowly bring it up and blend it underneath your main drum sound. Listen carefully. You're looking for that sweet spot where the drums just sound bigger, punchier, more exciting, but not obviously fake or processed.
It should just sound like better drums.
Exactly. Like your drums suddenly hit harder and sparkle more.
Cool. So parallel compression, clearly amazing for drums, but it's not just for drums, right? When else is it useful?
Oh, absolutely not just for drums. The whole principle works great on pretty much anything with transients and lower level details you want to bring out without losing the initial hit.
Like what?
Acoustic guitar is a classic example. You can bring up the resonance and sustain of the body, the ringing of the chords, without losing the crispness of the pick attack.
Makes sense.
Electric guitars, too. Add thickness, make them sound more powerful, more sustained, without turning them into mud.
Nice.
And vocals. It's fantastic on vocals.
Yeah.
You add presence, energy, help the vocals sit right up front in the mix, make it feel more powerful, but without that obviously squashed sound that kills the emotion.
So it keeps the dynamics in the performance.
It helps preserve them, yeah.
Yeah.
You get the power without sacrificing the natural feel as much. Some mixers even use a tiny bit on the whole mix bus.
The whole song.
Yeah, very subtle parallel compression just to add a touch of glue and perceived loudness. But that's maybe a more advanced thing. Today we're really focused on tracks, instruments, vocals.
This is all super valuable stuff. And it leads us perfectly, actually, to that thing we mentioned at the start, that amazing opportunity from audio plugin deals. Tell us about this.
Okay. Yeah, get ready for this. Right now, Audio Plugin Deals has this incredible 4-in-1 parallel processing bundle from a company called Final Mix Software. And the deal is, well, it's kind of nuts. It's 75% off.
75%.
75%. So the normal price for these 4 plugins together is $96, which is already pretty good, honestly. But for a limited time, you can get the whole bundle for just $24.
$24 for 4 parallel processing plugins. That is, wow. Okay, what exactly is in the bundle for $24?
You get 4 separate plugins, each designed specifically for parallel processing on key sources. There's Parallel Acoustic Guitar third.
Okay.
Parallel Drums third.
The New York style one.
That's the one geared for that, yeah. Then Parallel Electric Guitar third and Parallel Vocals third.
So dedicated tools for the main things you'd want to use this on.
Exactly. They've basically taken all the concepts we've just discussed, the aggressive compression, the blending, sometimes the EQ shaping, and built it into really easy-to-use plugins. Takes away all the complex setup and routing.
And they work in standard DAWs, like Logic, Pro Tools, Ableton.
Yep, totally compatible. They say designed for mixing in, meaning they work across all major DAWs, Ableton, Logic, Pro Tools, Cubase, you name it. Mac, PC, VST, AU, AAX formats. Pretty much universal compatibility.
Okay, so what makes these specific plugins special beyond just being easy? How do they tie into what we learned?
Well, the big thing is that simplicity and focus. They're built to give you that sound, that parallel compression sound quickly. They emphasize that they're designed to keep your original dry signal totally clean. No phase shift issues, no weird digital artifacts, none of that.
So they handle the potential problems internally.
That's the idea. No complex rating needed, no delay issues, no flanging. You just insert the plug-in. And they offer a huge range of processing intensity, from really subtle, like -144 dB, which is basically nothing, up to plus 24 dB of parallel signal boost, which is massive.
So lots of control over how much effect you add.
Tons of control. And users consistently talk about the sound. They use words like breathtaking, amazing, killer, especially for the parallel drums third. People rave about getting that creamy, cool, New York-style sound easily.
And the vocal one.
Parallel vocals third is apparently super versatile. Works great on male, female lead vocals, backgrounds, even group vocals. Again, aiming for that pro sound without fuss.
And who actually designed these? Is there some expertise behind them?
Yeah, this is pretty cool. They're based on the actual analog console techniques and recall sheets of a Grammy-winning producer named Rob Curelli.
Oh, wow. Who has he worked with?
Big names, like P. King, Christina Aguilera, Will Smith, loads of others. So you're getting techniques honed by someone working at the absolute top level packaged into these plugins.
That's some serious pedigree.
For sure. And the company Final Mix Software, they've been around since 2013, so they're established.
Okay, so for $24, who is this bundle an absolute, like, must-have for? Who needs to grab this deal?
Honestly, pretty much everyone involved in making music or audio sound better. If you're a beginner just learning about mixing, this makes a complex technique super accessible.
Right, takes the setup difficulty away.
Exactly. If you're a pro engineer, these are potentially huge time savers that deliver fantastic results quickly. Studio owners, composers, sound designers, even just audio enthusiasts tinkering at home.
Anyone making music.
Anyone who wants their tracks to have more punch, more body, more perceived loudness without sacrificing dynamics. For this price, it really feels like a must-have toolkit edition for, well, basically anyone serious about sound.
Okay, but what are people really saying? Out there on forums, YouTube, what's the word on the street about Final Mix software?
It's interesting. You do see some online discussions, maybe on places like Gearspace, about things like their demo policy or how they handle updates.
Yeah.
So, that's out there.
Okay, some chatter about the company side.
Right. But when it comes down to the actual sound of the plugins, the feedback is consistently overwhelmingly positive.
Really?
Yeah. People call them very good, real problem solvers for getting things to cut through a mix. Fantastic sounding comes up a lot. Some even say they hold their own against much more expensive plugins.
Wow. And usability.
YouTube reviews often highlight how quick and easy they are. Like insert the plugin, tweak a couple of knobs, and boop, you get the sound. That seems to be a major selling point.
Okay, let's quickly touch on each one again. Parallel drums, the third.
That one's all about parallel compression to the max. But musically, getting that big, punchy, NY-style drum sound easily. It often has controls like an instrument selector to tailor it, and a response knob to tweak how it reacts.
And the guitar ones, acoustic and electric the third.
Simplicity and instant results seem to be the theme there. People say things like, insert, and there it is, this sound. They usually have simple emphasis and response curve controls. Users describe the results as breathtaking, amazing, adding that body and sustain cleanly.
Sounds great. And parallel vocals 3.
Versatility is the key word there. Good for all kinds of voices. Again, simple controls like emphasis and response curve seem to let you dial in that presence and power quickly. Breathtaking results come up here too, helping vocals sit perfectly without sounding squashed.
Okay, so let's wrap this all up. What's the big takeaway from this deep dive into parallel compression and this specific bundle deal?
I think the main thing is, parallel compression is just such a powerful tool. It lets you add that punch, that body, that perceived loudness, but crucially, without killing the natural dynamics of your tracks. It's about adding, not just taking away.
Getting the best of both worlds, kinda.
Exactly. And this Final Mix software bundle at Audio Plugin Deals, it just makes accessing that power incredibly easy and affordable. High-quality results based on pro techniques for anyone from beginner to seasoned expert.
4 plugins. Designed by a Grammy winner, praised for the sound, praised for ease of use, and all for $24.
It's genuinely an incredible value proposition. Hard to argue with that.
It really is.
Yeah.
So for everyone listening, think about your mixes right now. Where could you use more punch, more weight, more presence?
Which tracks feel a little weak or maybe get lost?
Yeah.
Could parallel compression be the answer? This bundle is a fantastic way to find out.
Absolutely. We really encourage you. Head over to Audio Plugin Deals. Check out this Final Mix software 4-in-1 parallel bundle while the 75% off deal is still running.
Yeah, don't miss out on it. It can seriously elevate your productions. For $24, it's an amazing chance to add some real pro-level processing power to your toolkit.